Hey everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, we're down here on the causeway, and behind me are a number of houseboats where some residents on Waiheke Island live, and it's low tide. But when the tide comes in, it's quite beautiful down this area, and there are often quite a number of picturesque paintings done of this fairly classic and wonderful feature of living on Waiheke Island. Well, what's in the news? This morning, headlines vary from the propaganda rag, the New Zealand Herald, where the ferry debacle, the blind, rash and economic knee-jerk reaction of Nicola Willis to cancel the IREX project without knowing any of the costs has been minimised, because the break fee was one part of all of those costs, and the Herald led with the 144 million component of that break fee, with Winston Peters boasting that this was less than the 300 million that may have been previously estimated. However, over at Radio New Zealand, where you can generally get better quality news because it's not about a private set of interests or pandering to an audience for ratings, the full figure of $671 million that was wasted by Nicola Willis was in the headlines, and the nation was quite appalled, really, and quite shocked. And I think we can all agree that Nicola Willis reacted blindly at the time, treated the people in Hyundai very badly, just sending a text, and it was very unprofessional, and it wasn't the kind of behaviour that superior economic managers would have carried out. And ever since that time, Nicola Willis has harboured a lot of flack and resentment from up and down New Zealand for this poor economic management, and that's been defended to the hilt by I guess a bunch of wide boys that are going to lie to our faces about how whatever they do, it's all Labor's fault. It's always Labor's fault that the National Party carry on in this way. So that was one big shocker of a piece of news. But I drew attention this morning in my article to the fact that whilst Winston Peters is saying, well, look, there's this one single line in an ancient Treasury report that suggests that the IREX project could have maybe, possibly, who knows, there's nothing really behind it, kept blowing out. And it could have blown out to some imaginary hypothetical figure in the future of maybe 4 billion. Well, that hypothetical one line has been grasped onto by politicians who are trying to convince everyone that that was a fact, and it wasn't. It was just kind of like a weirdo, finger in the air forecast. But what is a fact, Bridie Winton, senior political journalist at Stuff, on the 31st of March 2025, published an article, and in the last couple of sentences in that article mentioned the fact that Winston Peters had appropriated $4 billion of capital spending for a fully owned Crown entity to manage the procurement of these ferries. $4 billion. So that means that the government of Nicola Willis and the government of Winston Peters and Christopher Luxon are going to spend $4 billion anyway on these ferries. And what have we got? Well, everyone's saying nothing to show for it so far, and that's right. What we've got to show for it at the moment is the retirement of the existing ferries. The last rail-enabled ferry is being shipped off, and now we're suffering a loss of service for possibly years. And this is because of Nicola Willis, that New Zealanders all have to suffer. And I don't think there's any excuses that can be made about how this lack of service now has anything to do with the Labour Party. This is the actions of the current government, $671 million and a lack of service to show for it. Wow, how bad is that? And of course they'll make excuses and brush it off. In other news during the week, we had the big cooker inquiry, and we saw Mike Hosking going off his tree, absolutely, about how there needs to be Jacinda Ardern in front of a pack of raving anti-vaxxers who wanted to kind of like extend the abuse that we saw against one of our finest prime ministers in history. And so he wasn't interested, Mike Hosking wasn't interested in information. He didn't care about the facts or, what the inquiry would be used to do. The inquiry had said itself, look, we've got all the information, these people have cooperated, but what he wanted was some sort of tearing apart in public, some sort of circus spectacle of abuse. And the Taxpayers Union rushed out and did a kind of a bi-panel poll. And that means an online panel of right-wing people ring up a kind of a fairly right-wing sample, a very small sample of only 500 people. And that means that the margin of error is so high that you can't really trust the results. Anyway, it rushed to try and convince people that the majority of people think that Jacinda Ardern should have been abused in front of a bunch of performing circus freaks that had already had a go at her so badly that it was a matter of shame for New Zealand. One of our greatest prime ministers who had saved 20,000 lives was being treated with abuse, and it still goes on. And they cannot get over it, especially Mike Hosking. He's never going to get over her. She didn't want to go on his show anymore and suffer the backstabbing after she'd left. That was never her reasoning. She said, well, look, I've got better places to go. There are other corners of New Zealand that never hear from her. And that seemed fair. But Mike sulked, had a big argument with Barry. You remember the whole story. It was just childish. Speaking of childish, Duncan Garner. Duncan Garner has said that Chloe Swarbrick is acting childishly. But Duncan Garner has also said in a statement on his editor-in-chief, which is kind of like more like Pillock-in-chief, that Chloe Swarbrick can never come back to politics and Parliament ever again. It's permanent. She's gone. We'll never see her ever again because unless she apologises, that's it. Jury will forever say you can't come back to Parliament. And this will go on all through 2025, after Christmas into 2026. And even if there's a new election, we don't have a new speaker, Jerry will make sure we never ever hear from Chloe Swarbrick again. And you heard it first from Duncan Garner, who wouldn't lie and wouldn't exaggerate and wouldn't put you crook. We also saw Jerry, at the time saying you're gone for the week, and then the next day saying things like, well, she could be gone for the week because the apology still stands beyond the 24 hours. And this is where Duncan Garner got it from, that this was permanent for all time. For the next 20 years, Chloe Swarbrick can never come back to Parliament because of Jerry. And Jerry, who took great offence at anything, to do with the National Party being called spineless, seemed out of order, really, because, he didn't think much of letting go a lot of other things in Parliament. So the lack of standards and the one-sidedness has pissed off a nation, really, with Jerry. And here at G News, we already know he's got to go. He's just not competent, can't hear anything, isn't inconsistent, overreaching, punishing females on the left, punching down. Come on, Jerry, do the right thing and resign. Today, all over the country, there will be mass protests in solidarity with the people in Palestine who are being starved to death and shot by the IDF when they go to try and feed themselves to survive. And so I'm going along to that. Along with Vicky, I'll probably provide some footage from Britomart today. So if you're in Auckland and you're not doing anything around 2 o'clock, come down to Britomart. Here is the dates and times today. If you're thinking you don't have anything to do and you do care about human rights, you do care about children being starved to death, and this is not who you are and you're going to take some action, here's the information you need to see. So go along if you can. I think it's really worth standing up at some stage in your life. What a great dog that was, huh? So in other news, we've also got Bernard Hickey this morning on his Dawn Chorus basically said, look, Auckland Council's in open revolt against central government because central government is trying to control everything that councils do now. It's taking over. There's no room for local government to fund itself or do anything. Central government do not believe in localism. They do not believe in devolution. And they lied to everybody, especially Christopher Luxon, before the election, because he kept saying that he did believe in it. But here is his actions speaking so much louder than words. And Simon Watts, what? That guy must be like the biggest eco-vandal, climate terrorist in history. This guy is just trying to justify, rate capping. You will have received some of your rates by now. They've all arrived in letterboxes around Auckland. Some people will be shocked, some people will be relieved. But next year, and there's going to be more coming, and this has to do with the way in which central government has taken away all the options for Auckland to fund it itself. And so we're basically being hammered by Christopher Luxon, and it's just wrong. And Bernard knows that this is wrong, and he's kind of providing all the evidence. In other news, I've referred earlier to in the week to how Christopher Luxon wasn't aware when it came to Hamas that they had offered to exchange all of the hostages many times. In fact, this was raised here in Parliament where Marama asked the question,
why should New Zealanders have faith in his process to decide on Palestinian statehood if he isn't being briefed on the thousands of Palestinian hostages being held by Israel or the multiple offers to return Israeli hostages for a lasting ceasefire?
Well, sorry, in answer to the second part of the question, second leg of the question, I'm not aware of that. We have been calling for Hamas to release hostages immediately. What happened on October the 7th was abhorrent. 1,200 innocent people killed, and hostages still being held in very cruel conditions is unacceptable. And we have consistently called for the release of those hostages. We've consistently called for humanitarian assistance unfettered to go from Israel into Gaza, and we consistently call for a ceasefire.
Then has the PM...
Honourable Marama Davidson.
Thank you. Then has the PM even asked any questions of his officials about the thousands of Palestinian hostages held by Israel or the multiple offers to release Israeli hostages, since he revealed yesterday and today that he hasn't been briefed on those issues?
I've been briefed on the situation in Israel, Gaza regularly and continue to be so. It is an absolutely human catastrophe what we are seeing. Everybody acknowledges that. We have actually foreshadowed to people over the course of this week that we are in the process of weighing up our position, and we will announce our cabinet position on that in September.
So Christopher Luxon didn't want to know about Hamas actually offering to give back the hostages, and the narrative continued in the public that they were holding on to those hostages and need to give them back. But here it appears that Israel was just not interested in those hostages. Well, you make up your own mind, but that's what happened in the New Zealand Parliament. So what else do I have to say? Well, last night I attended a reunion of sorts with people I used to work with about, I don't know, maybe something like 9 or 10 years ago. And I worked with them in a fairly large New Zealand corporation. And the funny thing about this was that not one of the people in the room had any idea what I do these days. So, what are you doing, G? What are you doing? And I just said to them, look, I just walk on the beach in the morning. I live on Waiheke Island. And yeah, sometimes I make the odd video, sometimes I write something. And I think they all felt a bit sorry for me that I wasn't still a corporate person, in IT. So it just goes to show, like even if, you're out there talking to politicians and you're, probably reasonably prolific. I think G News is just edging on 3 million views in the last 28 days. That it's still pretty small, like not many people know anything about what's going on in politics. People aren't tuned in, and they possibly regard this kind of thing as propaganda. But to me, it's the facts, and it's the way it is in the real world. This morning, we're looking at a one-term government. We're definitely staring at that down the barrel. These guys have got to go, New Zealand. You know what to do. Hopefully, I'll see many of you at protests this afternoon down in Britomart. I'll be there. I'll be producing a video from that protest for you. Hopefully some people from the Green Party and maybe people from the Labour Party will actually also be there supporting all the children who are being starved to death in open-air prison. That's all from me today. Hope you have a wonderful Saturday. It's a beautiful day. And I'll talk to you all again in the afternoon. See you later. Bye.
Welcome to G News, the good news.